welcome to my channel. Today we're finally trying the new Charlotte Tilbury foundation. I'm probably the last person to review this, but I am doing it very thoroughly. I tested this foundation out over the course of yesterday and the day before yesterday, and I feel like I got a feeling for it pretty well, but we're going to do a wear test today and a longer wear test tomorrow to make absolutely sure that this is a good foundation. Because so far, I'm sort of standing in the middle. This foundation has gotten all kinds of reviews. Very good ones, very poor ones, everything in the middle. And I'm also in the middle. I don't think this looks bad at all, but I'm not blown away by it either. So we're just going to look at it together, maybe wear it in different circumstances, and let's put it to the test. So if you are new to my channel, thank you so much for clicking on my video. My name is Cecile, I'm 28 years old, I live in the Netherlands, and I try to upload 2 to 3 times a week with makeup related content. So if that sounds interesting to you, then please consider subscribing. But let's go ahead and get into this review. I have nothing on my face currently, but I did just do a couple of things in the house, so I may be a little bit shiny from that, but I did shower yesterday, so it's not very greasy or anything. This is just how my natural skin looks. So let's get into this foundation. This is the box packaging. I purchased mine in the shade Too Warm. I was going to go with One Neutral, which is the shade I have in the Airbrush Flawless, but first of all, it wasn't available, and second of all, I thought the swatches made this one look pretty good as well. So I thought we could give it a try. I think it may be just a little bit dark for me, but I think we can make it work. So it comes in this squeezy tube with a pump. I really like this packaging, and immediately when I saw this, I know most people thought about the Estee Lauder Hydra something, but I thought about the Huda Glowish because that's my favorite foundation from last year and probably my favorite foundation of all time. It's extremely glowy, but in such a flattering way, and I was hoping that this would be kind of similar. We're going to put that to the test as well. Maybe tomorrow we can do a wear test with half Glowish and half Charlotte Tilbury, wouldn't that be fun? Also, I thought it could be kind of similar to the Dior Forever Natural Nude, which is also one of my favorite foundations. And I went into it with those assumptions, but I have to say it's not as glowy as the Glowish, and it's not as creamy and moisturizing as the Dior. And seeing other people's reviews, I also don't think it's quite as long wearing as either of those. So far it doesn't have a personality to me yet. It's just a little bit of everything and not everything. That's how I feel about it right now, but I have to admit I didn't put it through a proper wear test in daylight yet. So, and today it's also about 3 o'clock already, so we're going to do that tomorrow. But I wanted to get this review going. So, enough rambling. Let me put it on my hand. I do 2 pumps and a little bit. And my preferred way for any foundation, skin tint or everything is to use a brush. So I'm just going to use my brush and so you can see immediately that this is pretty full coverage, or at least a solid medium. When you blend it out more, it's more of an actual medium, but the coverage is really surprising. But I guess it makes sense because Charlotte Tilbury already has a light coverage glowy foundation, which is the Light Wonder. I don't personally have that one, and she does have a full coverage non-glowy foundation. So I think what she was missing was a glowy, slightly more full coverage foundation. I know a lot of people were surprised by the amount of coverage, but I think it makes perfect sense. And I actually think this color is pretty good on me. I thought it could have been the artificial lights from the past couple of days, but no. Especially in the summer, this is going to be perfect. So this is quite a bit. This is like 1.5 pump. This is how I like to apply my foundations. I don't like to shear them out too much. As you can see, it's pretty glowy. But also my regular skin is pretty glowy. But this is like extra glowy. It's a little bit yellow, but I am too, so I think it's okay. Yeah, coverage is pretty insane. As you can see, I have all these redness, little bumps here. I don't mind those, but just for reference, this is what I have on the other cheek as well, and it covers it up really well. So upon application, this looks wonderful. Let me just do the other side as well. And I'll use a little bit less, just to see how that looks. So this is a light layer. A lot less glowy, still quite glowy, and not nearly as perfecting. Of course, that makes sense. On this side you can definitely see my imperfections a little bit more. I like this side better, so I'm just going to add a little bit more. I guess because I use a brush and because I always pump out a little bit too much, I have a tendency to put on too much foundation all at once. I feel like my face can take it though. So that's a solid layer on both sides. Let me lean in a little bit. So this is what it looks like. I'd say it's a medium plus. You can still see a little bit of my imperfection, but not much. And this is why I like glowy foundations, because especially more full coverage glowy foundations, because they make you look so youthful. And they don't hide anything under a thick layer of foundation or a thick full coverage of foundation. They just hide it within the shine. If you look at my cheek, all you can see is this shine, and you don't really notice these spots over here, but they're still there, so it doesn't look completely unnatural. And that's what I really like about these kinds of foundations. I did show my boyfriend yesterday, of course with a little bit of concealer and powder, and well, I'll show you a picture. So on this picture you can see I did do a full face of makeup, but I tried to keep the powder around the perimeters of my face very light. And he said it did look a little bit too glowy. I was wearing a little bit too much highlighter though. We're not going to use any highlighter today, but as you can see it is definitely, it's almost oily looking, but I personally don't mind that look. I did see on some people that it was a little bit drying, even though it was shiny. And I did feel that way the day before yesterday. Around my mouth specifically. And especially after a couple of hours. It started looking a little bit dry and it started feeling a little bit tight as well. But on my forehead and my cheeks here, it still looked wonderful. Yesterday I decided to pair it with my favorite primer, which is the YSL Blur Primer, and it lasted a lot longer, looking a lot healthier and less dry. So I'm not going to use a primer today, like I said, but just keep that in mind, that a good moisturizing or hydrating or blurring primer, whatever you need, really does make a difference in this case. I'm just going to add a little bit of my Anastasia Beverly Hills concealer. Only around my eyes. I was going to do a video trying more new makeup and then putting this one in it, but I feel like those videos are already kind of long, so I definitely wouldn't have had the space to add 3 wear tests or 2. So that's why it's a separate video. I hope you still like to watch this one. I know I'm very late. You know, you don't always have the money for these kinds of things. Sometimes you have to wait. I'm going to take just a little bit of powder, but only to set my concealer. This is the Essence Brighten Up powder. I'll add a little bit of powder bronzer. This is the Catrice Sun Glow Matte Bronzing Powder. So it's a matte bronzer. What I saw yesterday was that there was definitely, after a couple of hours, a lot of glow coming through my bronzer, especially on my forehead. Like I said, this is a matte bronzer, so it definitely does mattify at first. So for it to look a little bit shiny at the end of the evening, I thought that was at least remarkable. I'll add a little bit of a matte bronzer or blush too. I have this Anastasia Trio and I'm going to use this shade here. Alright, so this is my finished makeup look for today. My forehead is insanely glowy at the moment. It's bordering oily. What I really like about the Huda Glowish foundation is that it pretty much does the same thing, but it looks less oily and more shiny for some reason. I think it's less of a moisturizing formula. There's actual pearls in the formula that make it look shiny, but it doesn't actually feel wet. And this one feels just a little bit wet on my forehead. But here, I really like this shine. So like I said, matte blush, matte bronzer, but still all this sheen. That's what I really like. So usually I would just put a little bit of powder on my forehead and it would be fine. But I want to see how this wears without doing that. So this is my final look and I'll see you in the next check-in. Hello, it's now 8 o'clock or 7:30 actually. So I've been wearing this foundation for about 4 hours and I just wanted to come in quickly and show you what it looks like. This is artificial lighting because it's now dark, but as you can see my forehead is still pretty glowy and now my nose is starting to get a little bit glowy as well. But on the bottom of my face, even though it is still a little bit glowy, I feel like it's also a little bit dry. Like, do you see that? It looks a little bit textured and it didn't when I first applied it, and I'd say it looked about the same for 3 hours and after that it started to look like this. So I don't think it looks bad, not at all, but not ideal. I think I'll show you again. Right here, I just don't love the way it looks really up close, but I still don't think it looks bad. I think a little bit of powder on my forehead and my nose would have been better. So yeah, so far so good. I'll show you again in a couple of hours and then we'll round up this wear test. Hi, I have to be a little bit more quiet now because people are sleeping. It's about 11 o'clock and I really want to take my makeup off now. So it's only been about an 8-hour wear test for today, but maybe I'll do another one tomorrow. So let me show you what things are looking like. Pretty much the same as in the last update, I feel. Maybe it looks a little bit more textured and dry here, but it doesn't look more oily on the other places. So overall, I would say it looks about the same. What I would do differently next time is I'll put on that smoothing primer from YSL to battle these dry looking bits, and then I'll add a little bit of powder on my forehead and my nose to combat the ultra oiliness. And then I think it'll look pretty, it'll look fine. Not the prettiest foundation ever, but definitely not ugly. So that's how I feel about it right now, but I'm curious to see how this holds up against my Huda Glowish foundation. So that's what we're trying out tomorrow. So it's now the next day, and for today I want to give this comparison a try. So I'm going to try my beloved Huda Glowish compared to the new Charlotte Tilbury Beautiful Skin Foundation. This was my favorite foundation of 2021. And I liked it because it had these little pearls in the formula, so it didn't look greasy, it just looked shiny. I guess there is a difference. But overall it looked pretty similar to the Beautiful Skin Foundation, only it wore a little bit better on me. So slightly different finish, same type of coverage, so medium plus I would say, and a little bit better wear time. So we're going to put these to the test next to each other. I'll put the Huda on this side. I'm going to use a brush on both sides, and I'm also not using any primer on either side of my face. So this is the Glowish foundation. This is a slightly lighter layer than I would usually use, but I think this is a fair amount. I think this is like a regular amount, not a thin or a thick layer. And you can see it's definitely quite shiny, but it doesn't really look oily. I don't think so. But especially here, you can really see this is the kind of place that would usually never highlight, but now it does. So you can definitely see the pearls at work here. I'll clean off the brush a little bit on a towel, but I'll use the same one. By the way, in the Glowish foundation, I wear the shade Fair. And I think that's going to be comparable to shade 2W in the Charlotte Tilbury. So I'm taking one full pump of the Charlotte Tilbury, and I think I did 1.5 of the Glowish, but this one spreads a bit more easily. So the Charlotte Tilbury is not extremely liquidy, but it is a lot thinner than the Glowish foundation. The Glowish is actually pretty creamy. So this is the Charlotte Tilbury. I think the colors are pretty similar. But now that I see them side to side, I think the Charlotte Tilbury actually has more coverage. I think I usually put on a little bit more of the Glowish and it gives it a more full coverage appearance. And because it is a more glowy finish, it definitely bounces off your imperfections, so that's nice. But if I look a little bit more closely, I definitely still see them. And I also see a tiny bit of redness still. Whereas on this side, I don't see any redness. And I see my spots a little bit less. Now, if I do a close inspection of my forehead, I'd say, because this is the smoothest part of my skin and this is the most, well, if it gets oily right here. So I think the Huda Glowish looks a little bit more silvery and the Charlotte Tilbury just looks a little bit more skin toned in its reflection. So that's what I think the pearls do in the Glowish. I actually really like that look. But it's definitely a difference from the two. Even though this one has a little bit more coverage, I'd say this one is a little bit more natural. So it's just the kind of effect that you're going for. I'll finish up my face and I'll show you the finished look and we can see how they look with a full face on. So this is with my makeup complete. It's definitely pretty glowy because I kept all my base products cream. So I have cream bronzer from Chanel. I have the Fenty cream blush in the shade Strawberry Drip. I don't have any highlighter. I did my brows, some mascara and some lipstick. This is Fuchsia Perfect from Pat McGrath. I think I did put a little bit of powder here, but only on top of my concealer. I think if I look in daylight, there's daylight at this side of me. Yeah, I do think that this side is just a teeniest bit more glowy. I can see it especially here on my forehead. This just looks a little bit more reflective. But overall, the difference is pretty minimal. So let's see how they wear. It's now 4 o'clock, so it won't be a very long wear test, but we'll see, for at least like 4 hours or something. That's when the Charlotte Tilbury foundation started looking a little bit more oily versus dry, and that's when usually the Glowish foundation just looks the same. So let's see. I'm back for my first and only check-in for today. I've been wearing this makeup for about 4.5 hours. So like I said, it's a shorter one today, but I think it shows perfectly how similar these foundations are. Really, if you look at my face, you wouldn't say I'm wearing two different kind of foundations. The Huda is definitely still pretty glowy. But so is the Charlotte Tilbury. And even though it looks a little bit less glowy over here. It doesn't look as dry as yesterday. And also I found that both of them settled just the teensiest bit in my smile lines, but nothing major. I think both of them are wearing really well today. Maybe it was the fact that I used cream products on top. Maybe it made it look better. Anyway, I still prefer my Glowish because it gives a more even glow and because it has that little bit of pearlescence in it. But I also really like the Charlotte Tilbury. So in conclusion, if you didn't like the Glowish because you thought it was too pearly, then maybe you will like the Charlotte Tilbury. But if you don't like glowy foundations at all, then you won't like the Charlotte Tilbury either. Also, I think if you're very dry, you may need to hydrate your skin a little bit better than I did. And if you're very oily, you'll need to powder a little bit more than I did. But I think it's all manageable and I think it wears really well. I'm quite impressed. So that was my review. Thank you so much for watching and I will see you in the next video.